Hey guys, it's Roscoe, and on the Space Couch today I'd like to talk about colonising Mars and what we're going to need to take with us when we get there. So first we're going to need somewhere to live. This is probably going to be one of those Bigelow style habitats that's been pre-flown to Mars and it's waiting there, probably right next to a Falcon 9 rocket that's refueled itself from the atmosphere of Mars. Now, these habitats, obviously, they'd serve as the initial colony outpost or base or whatever it is. But eventually, we're going to need to start building actual structures. Either bury something in the ground, build something above ground, or seal off some of those lava tubes and pressurise them. So for that, we're going to need heavy construction equipment. That could probably be, well, it would have to be flown out to Mars beforehand, before any of the colonists even leave Earth, I expect. So heavy diggers, cranes, all sorts of stuff. Definitely, yeah. What else are we going to need? We're going to need something to eat. Now, obviously, we're going to have to take plants and seeds and all that with us, and loads of those, what are they, the MREs, the military meals ready to eat. Now, as for growing plants there, once you've arrived, Elon Musk reckons this would be quite simple. Just a sealed greenhouse dome would be sufficient, as the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere would be turned into oxygen by the plants, you know, and obviously that would help the rest of the colony by providing it with a breathable atmosphere, as well as sucking up all that CO2. However, we should also, or should we also, be taking animals with us, both for food and also for work purposes, and also like pets, like, say, you know, those trauma dogs that they have, for instance, that help people who have been traumatized. So we'll see. Well, also, what about insects? You're going to have to take insects with you for the soil, you know. Worms? Going to have to take all that good stuff. Remember, there was those, what was it, hissing cockroaches, ants, and what was it? I can't remember the other thing that was in the Bigelow habitat. Going to have to take them with us as well, you know. I tell you what, in that lower Martian atmosphere, winged insects would be bigger. So you probably one day it's going to be Attack of the Killer Martian Bees, I reckon. You know, but they'd have a critical role in any terraforming attempt, you know, if the atmospheric pressure and the oxygen levels got to any sort of stage where they could be released into the wild. And to help that process of breaking down the atmosphere and reconstituting it, they probably would have had to have released algae and lichens into the wild. And also, these insects would help pollinate any bioengineered plants that might be able to actually grow out on the surface. Next thing we're going to need, and I've mentioned this previously, is the internet. Can't go to Mars and not take the internet and our tech with us. We'll be stepping back, how long would it be till we're on Mars? Say we're on Mars 20 years' time, we'll be stepping back 100 years from that point, probably, if we didn't take it with us. Hence that satellite project with Google that Elon Musk is doing for that satellite constellation of Earth that I believe is a prototype for a Martian-based fleet. We're going to need global GPS on that world in case any explorer parties get lost in the middle of a dust storm or they just run off course, you know? And not just satellites, but base stations, Wi-Fi base stations on the ground. Perhaps the Wi-Fi hotspots could be embedded in the infrastructure as it's a blank slate. Why not? Say, for instance, the cat's eyes on any Martian highway. You know, Wi-Fi could maybe be embedded in there. So we're also going to have to take a ton of computer servers, smartphones, tablets, laptops, or whatever has replaced those by then. You know, we're going to have as much high tech as possible. So you're going to have iPhones on Mars, you know. That's how people are going to communicate with each other, certainly inside anyway. Probably be a more beefed up version if they're communicating with those outside. But we're going to have all that stuff with us. Server farms as well as hydroponic farms are what we can expect on Mars. Those Google, Facebook balloons that they're testing for global internet coverage, as well as a satellite fleet Google are interested in, that could be useful on Mars also. Release a bunch of them into the atmosphere, let them drift around, you know, or airships would be useful, like, you know, the Airlander I might do a program on that. It's quite an interesting project. They would help create a platform for global internet coverage as well as exploration. You know, there's that short film Wanderers that's in my liked videos and my playlist you should check out. There's a great scene in there of dirigible flying over the Gale crater in Mars. It's fantastic, you know. Also useful in that respect of exploration would be drones. And there was a report recently, NASA is thinking or trying to figure out how you would build a drone that would work on Mars. I'm sure they'll spend hundreds of millions of dollars at it while someone else will just modify an existing one, you know. They definitely help map the planet and point out any interesting geographical features for exploration teams to check out, you know, like flyovers of the Valles Marineris, for instance. That would be awesome by drone, wouldn't it? You know what else we'll have to take with us? 3D printers. And we're going to have to take a bunch of them with us, you know, and they're probably going to have to become the general all-purpose type of tech that everyone knows how to use. I would have thought, though, in 20 years' time we'll all know how to use 3D printers, though. Could be some giant printers along for the ride, you know, like those massive ones the Chinese have where they can 3D print an entire house in 24 hours. There'll be the smaller ones that can print replacement parts, like, say, the one we've got on the International Space Station. And there's another one that's just recently been making news. It's much faster than the others, up to 100 times faster. And it creates the 3D printed object using light and oxygen. So you have this, whatever it is you're printing, rises out of a pile of goo. It's like the Terminator, the second movie, where it rises out of the liquid metal, apparently. They'll also be printing things like food, I expect, medicines, skin grafts, perhaps, prosthetics if anyone loses a limb, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, definitely, that will be interesting. And obviously 3D printing is evolving rapidly all the time, so who knows how advanced it will be by then. You know what else we'll be taking with us? There's politics, unfortunately. How is Mars going to be governed once we're there? No doubt at the beginning it'll be under the laws of whatever company or nation or group of nations lands there, or if it is a company, what domicile it's incorporated in. The usual one is the state of Delaware for most corporations in the United States, for instance. And that'll probably suffice for a time, that kind of governance, at least until it starts to grow, and especially if that colony does approach self-sufficiency, which is Elon Musk's plan, of course. No doubt in time there'd be an independent Mars, or a collection of independent states on Mars like Earth, or it could even be a bunch of, say, off-world US states, Russian oblasts, EU territories, Chinese provinces, perhaps. What form of government should Mars have? That's going to be a huge question in the future. There'll be wars fought over that, I expect. It's safe to say it'll probably be some sort of Republican form of government with a president and a Congress, assuming we don't have some terrible step back and decide absolute monarchs are the way to go. In the Kim Stanley Robinson Mars trilogy, Red, Green and Blue Mars, he goes into this in quite some depth, and congressmen in that, I believe, they're selected by lottery, so it's just random, and their constitution is essentially every constitution, you know, sifted through the best parts from each, and a bunch of documents attached to it for aspirational purposes, like, say, the US Constitution has a preamble, that sort of thing. Very interesting. And with politics, what is the natural bedfellow of politics? It's money. What sort of currency should Mars have? I mean, in the beginning, if there's an actual need for any actual physical cash in the first few groups of colonists, it'll probably be whatever they took with them. So, I don't know, whatever, like pounds, dollars, euros, yen, whatever, are just to hand, will form the basis of the currency, I expect. It's probably going to be a bit barter-based, I expect, in the beginning, that economy, because what value does money have where there's only a handful of people? It doesn't really have much, although all the money you're being paid to be there is waiting for you on Earth if you ever go back there, I expect. Yeah, so, I mean, a Martian currency will get developed as the need for actual cash evolves, although probably by then it's still going to be like plastic, or rather electronic based, rather than physical currency. So it could be a Martian dollar or a Martian euro, although in Robertson's books. It's called The Sequin, which I quite like, and it's based on, I think, the price of hydrogen peroxide rather than, say, the price of gold. Yeah, it's quite interesting. And whatever they do decide currency-wise, obviously that will have a huge impact on any nascent Martian economy that might be growing, for good or for bad. What will that economy look like, in fact? I reckon it's going to be this strange mix of ultra-corporate type of efforts, state-owned enterprises, and hard manual labour. Maybe one day that hard manual labour, it'll be done by prisoners from a penal colony, you know, who are tasked with building the infrastructure on new worlds, you know. Private industry and government-owned enterprises, they do seem to like prison labour, don't they? Now, another thing we'll be taking to Mars with us is religion. As preferable as it might be to be able to leave some of our baggage behind on the home world, we're more than likely to be taking our problems with us, you know. I was talking about this with Mike from the Mike and D show, and he said, will we escape the obvious? No, we won't. Not when it comes to things like this, you know. The human condition still has centuries, if not millennia, to work out all those old hatreds, I expect. We can hope that the early settlers will have more on their minds and more interested in building a new society rather than just doing some cut and paste from Earth, with all its imperfections, of course. They could hold out the hope of a future Mars being a more equitable society, I suppose, although in that Red Rising book and Golden Sun, I think was the second one, Mars is not like that at all. It's slaves and the rich. What would a nascent Martian religion look like? Because eventually, if we settle Mars, there will be native religions to Mars, you know. Very interesting possibilities, you know. What would form the basis of their central belief system? Who knows? Could it be, oh, I don't know, the Great Flying Spaghetti Monster of the Pastafarians, for instance? The early settlers on Mars are going to have a sense of humour about them, after all, to make it through. They can't just be solidly working, or they'll just go and kill each other. Yeah, definitely. Although, probably hundreds of years from now, the Martian religion, it'll be some odd mix-up of the old Earth religions and whatever beliefs they've formed on their own planet. Be interesting, very interesting, yeah. I'll tell you what else you definitely need if you're going to try and colonise Mars is an exit strategy if it fails. Yeah. It's all very well sending loads and loads of cargo and the initial settlers to Mars, but they do need to have an escape route in case something goes wrong, definitely. Asteroid strikers coming in, or the colony is failing and they can't fix it, they have to evacuate. So as well as, say, a Mars-to-orbit craft, and maybe some iteration of a Dragon capsule could do those, like, orbital hops on Mars to the carrier ship in orbit, they'll need that interplanetary colony ship, the Mars Colonial Transport. It'll have to be on a constant cycle between Earth and Mars. Bunch of them will have to be on a constant cycle, I expect. And I do think there will be a lot of them one day. There will be a fleet to transport those millions of people. So yes, definitely need to have your backup plan waiting for you so you can escape. Now, what about population control or population expansion? That is going to be crucial on a future Mars. In the early days, the population of any Mars colony is going to have to be very tightly controlled. The air, food, water, all the resources, you know. The early family structures on Mars could be like China's one-child policy, I expect. I suspect most of the initial expansion of the colony will come from new arrivals, colonists, rather than natural-born Martians. But that will happen eventually, you know, people who are born on Mars. The first generation born on Mars will be worlds famous, you know, until there's like 100 of them, I expect. And how long would it then be before a natural-born Martian visited Earth? Can you imagine the reception they'd get? As opposed to a returning colonist who would also get the Neil Armstrong reception, obviously. Within 50 years, we could see it in our lifetime. Wouldn't that be awesome? Anyway, guys, that's it for me for this time. I thought you might be interested in some of the lesser-known problems of colonising Mars. Please feel free to subscribe to my channel, like the video, or leave a comment or a suggestion for an upcoming episode.